Patriots Day is a movie that celebrates our first responders, and they deserve it. I mean, the heroics from civilians, cops, firefighters, EMTs that day are unimaginable. You couldn't do it in 50 movies.
Mark Wahlberg plays a Boston cop who becomes embroiled in a turf war with the FBI. But is it the whole story?
It's wonderful that we are celebrating the great work of the cops, but the real story involves a federal informant. The real story is about the intelligence community and the lack of intelligence sharing that continues to this day.
There are people close to this tragedy that believe it could have been avoided.
There is more to what happened on Patriots Day. And I think that the whole scenario of how a bombing was allowed to have taken place and the people that were responsible for it, that story still remains to be told.
July 2012. The real story begins almost a year before the Boston bombing, when a young immigrant from the northern Caucasus region of Russia returns to the United States. He is a suspected terrorist whose appearance at passport control should raise the alarm. Tom Pasquarello is a former federal agent and chief of the Somerville Police Department.
If you're on two-terror watch list, even before that person steps foot in the United States, it should have raised red flags. So when they arrive at JFK Airport, they should have people looking at the manifest and be looking for these passengers for potential secondary investigation.
The passenger's name is Tamerlan Tsarnaev. He has a green card, but no valid passport. Despite this, his re-entry into the United States goes unquestioned. This moment will haunt the city of Boston for years to come.
This guy managed to leave the country, spend 6 months overseas, and manages to breeze back through without a passport, while on not one but two terror watch lists. It's completely inexplicable.
Michelle McPhee is an investigative reporter who has developed a theory about the Boston bombers.
There's only one way that something like that could take place, and that's if somebody was pulling the strings to help him get in and out of the country.
April the 15th, 2013. It's Patriots Day, the state holiday everyone in Boston looks forward to. The city celebrates with its annual marathon.
30 seconds to go. This will be the last announcement before the start. Have a great race, everybody.
Patriots Day, it's a day that every Bostonian hangs around on Boylston Street. It's a beautiful day. The Red Sox are playing. It's a big day in Boston.
And there they go.
It's kind of like the beginning of spring. People make an outing out of it. It's not just world-class athletes. A lot of people from the surrounding communities of Boston, from Boston itself, they run in it, and their families go and cheer them on. They make a family day out of it.
Okay, so let's see if we can identify a few more people. The stream keeps coming. 27,000 strong starting out of Watertown this morning.
But at 2:49 p.m., terror strikes.
What the hell was that? Oh my God! Something blew up! Something blew up! Oh my God, something happened!
12 seconds after the first blast, there is a second explosion.
When the first blast hit, I was essentially on the crime scene within a matter of minutes. It was horrifying.
With bomb shrapnel everywhere, it soon becomes clear that it's a terrorist attack.
Are you okay?
Doing great.
Is she bleeding from anywhere?
Yes, there's a lot of blood underneath.
All right, you leave her there.
You want to tie it off?
Tie it off her body.
You're going to be all right, sweetie, okay?
When I got down there, it was clear that there was a major catastrophic event. I saw all the blood, and I saw, you know, the police officers huddled around things that I now know were the bodies of the 3 folks who passed away.
2 young women and an 8-year-old boy are killed at the scene, and hundreds more are critically maimed or injured.
It was chaos. The most vivid memory for many of us is the puzzle pieces of body parts that were strewn all over the street. It looked like Baghdad. It didn't look like anything that we had ever seen in Boston before, and it's something I think that haunts me, and it haunts a lot of people that I know, because these are memories that are completely unforgettable.
Bomb? Think it's safe to be here? Probably not.
While FBI investigators scour the crime scene for bomb fragments, hundreds of FBI and other law enforcement agents take over the Black Falcon cruise terminal to analyze mobile phone and CCTV footage.
It was such a huge amount of information that they were going through that they took over an entire hangar.
Now, there was hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of footage, but the key to the investigation, I think, was looking at all those moments leading up to the bombings to look for abnormalities in behavior.
In just over 24 hours, the odd behavior of one man draws the attention of the investigators.
The first bomb went off down the street. Everyone looked that way down the street except for one person, and that was the man in the white hat. They knew right then that this has to be one of the guys involved, because your natural reaction is to look. It didn't surprise him. It surprised everyone else because they didn't know it was coming.
12 seconds after the first explosion, the second bomb goes off exactly where the man in the white hat had been standing. Investigators follow his movements and quickly connect him to a man with a black hat. The man in the black hat is seen loitering at the finish line, where the first bomb explodes. White hat and black hat are now the prime suspects. Local cops want to release the pictures. The FBI says no.
There was a big debate over when to release those pictures to the public. The feds didn't want them released because they wanted to try to find out who they were before they turned to the public. The Boston police wanted them out there to find the guys. They thought that the city would work for them and help identify them.
It's a debate dramatized in the movie, but Michelle has a theory that the real story is far more controversial.
There were a lot of people that believe that as early as Tuesday, a day after the blast, there were FBI agents working out of the Black Falcon terminal that knew exactly who these bombers were. A law enforcement source I trusted a great deal texted me. The text said, "Michelle, they know. The feds know."
The source tells Michelle about an extraordinary confrontation when a drug enforcement officer challenges 2 FBI agents who appear to know more than they are letting on.
So apparently, he saw a group of agents comparing photos under their desk, and he said, "Wait a minute. You guys know who these people are. You know who these people are, and you're hiding it from us. What the bleep is wrong with you?"
And Michelle wasn't the only person hearing these rumors.
Now, obviously, the same rumors that I got text messaged about coming from Black Falcon Terminal made their way to Boston Police Headquarters, made their way to Ed Davis.
Incensed, Police Commissioner Ed Davis confronts the chief of the FBI's Boston office, Richard Deslauriers, demanding to know their names.
Davis was mad. He was very angry, and he used profanity and swore and said, "This is my city. I want these pictures released. I want to get these guys."
The next day, the FBI's hand is forced when the photos are leaked to the press.
After a very detailed analysis of photo, video, and other evidence, we are releasing photos of these 2 suspects. They are identified as Suspect 1 and Suspect 2.
So the cops leaked these photos to a local reporter, and that reporter called the FBI looking for a comment, and that forced their hand.
But if it knows the names of the suspects, the FBI is telling no one. The press conference is the first time most local cops see the photos of the suspects.
Like staggering is that before that press conference on April 18th, when those photos were released, they didn't share a single one of those images with anyone in local law enforcement. You have cops who know the neighborhoods, who know the people, who know the faces, and you don't share the photos with them before you go public with them? Absolutely absurd.
At first, they should have coordinated with local law enforcement, said, here's our suspects. Who knows these individuals? They didn't do that part.
The way the feds were behaving, it really had the markings of something a lot bigger than this hunt for the 2 Boston Marathon attackers. You know, were they protecting someone? Was there an intelligence failure somewhere? But it just seems that their behavior pointed to a bigger story.
4 hours after pictures are released, and 2 miles from where the bombs exploded on Boylston Street, police are called to the MIT college campus in Cambridge.
Oh my goodness. Officer down. Officer down. All units.
An officer has been shot point blank in the head.
MIT is one of the most prestigious universities in America. It's a very quiet campus, and police officers at MIT don't get shot. It just doesn't happen. I just knew it was connected to what was happening. It was just way too violent an act to be a coincidence.
The brutal killing is vividly shown in the movie Patriots Day, but the film fails to explore the lead-up to this event. 4 hours earlier, Sergeant Rob Lowe is patrolling the suburb of Cambridge when he is called to investigate a suspicious vehicle. He notices the license plate is obscured.
Sir, can I see some identification?
It's okay, officer. I'm FBI.
Sir, can I see ID, please?
There. Okay. Now beat it.
It is customary for federal agents to warn local cops if they are working in their precinct. Once again, it seems the local law enforcement is being left in the dark.
It wouldn't have been that unusual for the Bureau to be working there. But when the agent just flashes his badge and doesn't say anything, that's the unusual part.
And there are other incidents that suggest the FBI is withholding information from the cops.
There were at least 3 911 calls about suspicious vehicles in the area, and when the police encountered these people, they were teams of FBI agents.
The police suspect the heavy presence of the FBI is because it knows the Boston bombers are in Cambridge.
A lot of police sources are saying, you wouldn't believe what's going on in Cambridge. We don't know why they're here, we don't know what they're doing here, but someone's gonna get hurt. And sure enough, that turned out to be true.
Within hours, 27-year-old police officer Sean Collier is murdered. Forensic evidence will later prove his killers are the Boston bombers. Police believe Collier's death could have been avoided had the FBI told them the terrorists were in Cambridge.
MIT police officer Sean Collier was executed in cold blood by the Boston Marathon attackers, and the police were apoplectic.
Sean Collier was an all-American kid and great brother, great son, and a great friend to many people, and he just always wanted to be a police officer. That's all he ever wanted. He had his dream job, and it cost him his life.
2 hours after Sean Collier's death, police get a break. At 12:20 a.m., they receive a call from a man fleeing from 2 men who kidnapped him and his car.
I think he knew if he didn't jump out of that car at that precise moment, I think he believed that they were going to kill him.
For an hour and a half, the terrified man had been forced to drive the kidnappers. When they stopped for gas, he seized his opportunity.
Hello, sir. This happened. Someone took to my car. They have guns. They did the marathon explosion.
10 minutes later in neighboring Watertown, police officer Joe Reynolds is told that the carjackers are heading in his direction.
Suspect is armed.
When Reynolds spots the vehicle, he tries to be cautious.
I was just waiting for backup so I could turn my lights on and conduct a motor vehicle stop. I didn't have time to.
Without warning, a suspect jumps from the vehicle and unleashes a hail of bullets.
A whole mix of emotions going on in my mind right then. To flee, to fight, to do something more. What I did was I stopped my car, opened my driver's side door, and I drew my pistol and we started firing back and forth at each other.
Soon, backup arrives.
And as I step in the yard behind them, they say, Sarge, Sarge, get down, they're shooting at us. I was a little bit of a wise guy, and they said, yeah, really, no shit. It was pretty obvious that there was a gun battle going on.
But the cops soon realize they have even bigger problems.
We were exchanging gunfire for probably 1.5 to 2 minutes with both suspects. And at that point, I see a lighter. We hear it going down the street, you know, clink, clink, clink. And all of a sudden, boom.
It's like, what was that? We don't deal with that kind of stuff in police work.
People were panicked, diving for cover. One family was watching footage of the scene outside their home, only to see a bullet come through their house and into the television. It was absolute mayhem.
In the aftermath of the explosion, one suspect escapes, but in the process, runs over his accomplice. While the critically injured suspect is rushed to the hospital, the cops try to take in what just happened.
The shootout itself lasted 9 minutes. To me, it lasted 1.5 minutes. It was so fast. Everyone was slapping me on the back saying, good job, but all the adrenaline had just leaked out of me. I just had to sit down, and I wanted to be away from everybody, and I actually, you know, I felt kind of faint from all the emotion that I think just went through me.
Some of the Boston officers are saying to us, you know who you guys have here? We say, you've got a couple of carjackers. No, these are the Boston Marathon bombers.
1:35 a.m. While one suspected bomber remains at large, his accomplice succumbs to multiple gunshot wounds and blunt trauma and is pronounced dead. The FBI wastes no time running his prints across its database.
Sure enough, within 10 minutes, they had an identification, and this guy's name was Tamerlan Zanayev, and his brother, Dzhokhar Zanayev.
Both brothers are registered as living at 410 Norfolk Street in Cambridge, the very same area where local cops reported FBI agents were carrying out secret surveillance. But now everyone is focused on finding the second suspect. April the 19th. It's Friday afternoon. The city is under curfew, while police and SWAT teams go door to door in the search for the younger Tsarnaev brother.
The city was on complete lockdown. They made the decision to shut down all public transportation, and the city was completely abandoned. It was like a ghost town.
For 15 hours, the surviving fugitive remains at large. But just as the curfew is lifted, police receive a 911 call.
I have a boat in my yard. There's blood all over the inside. There's a person in the boat. Are you sure? I just looked in the boat.
Thermal imaging shows that the body inside is still moving.
The boat is surrounded. There is a sniper on the second floor, and they're yelling, get out. And this sniper on the second floor recalls him saying over and over again, the FBI is going to kill me.
Without warning, the surrounding force unleashes a barrage of gunshots.
And that boat got lit up, roughly 215 rounds. Who knew that fiberglass was so bulletproof? But in the end, Dzhokhar Zanayev was still alive.
The man who emerged looked like an unlikely terrorist.
We couldn't believe what we were seeing. Is that the guy? Is that the kid who bombed the Boston Marathon? Sitting there curled up in a boat with 1 million police officers around him?
I'm watching police cars driving away from the scene and crowds of people cheering the police. I've never seen that in my entire career. That's how much this brought the community together.
When he was captured and I was in the middle of all that celebration, I was pretty overcome with emotion myself.
Let the guitars down! America will stand. We got God bless America.
For 5 days, the city has been living in fear. This is where the movie ends. In reality, the story is far from over. Michelle McPhee is determined to discover what the FBI knew and if Tamerlan and Dzhokhar could have been stopped.
I'm a Bostonian. They attacked my city, so I needed to know more about Tamerlan Tsarnaev and his brother, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev. And what you find out is shocking. Really, it's shocking.
Tamerlan is the eldest son of Anzor and Zubayda Tsarnaev. The family had lived in the Russian Republic of Dagestan, a hotbed of ethnic and religious tension. In 2002, citing fears of persecution by the Russian authorities, Anzor gains asylum in the US. Tamerlan immediately embraces American culture. He chases girls and is obsessed with clothes.
When he arrived in the US, he's like this flashily dressed Euro trash kid, walking up and down Newbury Street with a sweater tied around his shoulders.
He was your average immigrant trying to assimilate into American society.
Tamerlan's brother Dzhokhar works hard at school, was an honor student and captain of the wrestling team. But things change in college. He gets dismal grades, becomes a thrill seeker, and makes $1,000 a week selling marijuana. But Dzhokhar's older brother was taking a different path.
He was a two-time heavyweight champ. He was a good fighter. He was recognized when he went out, hey champ, hey champ. People knew him because he had this recognition in the fighting world. There was one problem. He wanted to fight in the United States Olympics, and he couldn't because he wasn't a citizen.
Tamerlan was desperate to become a full US citizen, but there were signs that he was also becoming radicalized. In 2009, he is arrested after assaulting his girlfriend for dressing immodestly.
The Cambridge police arrive after she calls him hysterical, saying she just got hit by her boyfriend. And he says, yeah, I slapped her, look at her. Well, that sealed his fate. That slap sealed his fate. Under American immigration law, you can't apply for citizenship if you are in violation of the moral turpitude clause. So if you commit a crime, you can't even open a naturalization application for 5 years. So with that slap, he essentially wiped out all of his dreams of boxing for the US Olympics team.
I think he looked at boxing as his calling. And I think when that dream fell apart, I think that was a pivotal moment in his life.
As an out-of-work Muslim with a rap sheet, Tamerlan's chances of getting US citizenship were close to zero.
He was pulled in the direction of religious extremism. He stopped trying to assimilate and do the things that normal American teenagers do, and he started pursuing extreme beliefs and extreme activities and started becoming more of a religious zealot.
Tamerlan's radicalization was so extreme, it was picked up by Russian intelligence.
The Russian FSB intercepted some messages between Tamerlan Tsarnaev and a very dangerous jihadi in the Northern Caucasus of Russia, saying Tamerlan Tsarnaev is going to come to Russia and join the jihad.
The Russians are so concerned, they take the unusual step of contacting the FBI.
This guy was obviously enough of a risk to America that the Russian government saw fit to warn us about him.
But it isn't until 4 days after the Boston bombing that the FBI finally admits it has been watching Tamerlan Tsarnaev for a long time.
The FBI comes up with this shocking confession that they had opened a case into Tamerlan Tsarnaev roughly 2 years earlier. So the FBI was pressed a little bit, and they admitted, yeah, we looked at the guy, we didn't see anything wrong, but we added him to a terror watch list. Wait a minute. You added him to a terror watch list. As a reporter, my immediate thought was, let me get this straight. An agent went to this guy's house multiple times, interviewed him multiple times, and didn't recognize him as suspect Black Hat.
It just didn't make sense that an agent who not only saw the individual, but interviewed the individual, and interviewed the individual at his home 2 miles away from where the bombings took place, would fail to recognize him. It was unsettling.
A terrible possibility opens up to Michelle.
Immediately, the whole week flashes before me. The kid's a rat. Of course, this makes sense. Of course, this is why the FBI's been behaving like this all week. He's an asset. He's an informant. He was working for them.
Officially, the Bureau claims it was following up on Russian warnings regarding his radical views. But Michelle believes that in Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the FBI had found an ideal person to flip.
Here you have a guy who's incredibly motivated to become a United States citizen. And he's the perfect recruit. He's broke, he's unemployed, his whole family's on welfare, he has a criminal record. So all of the things that made Tamerlan Tsarnaev a terrible candidate for citizenship made him a very good candidate to become a moss crawler or a raker for information.
All the elements were in place for a deal. Tamerlan wanted American citizenship. The FBI wanted to infiltrate potential US jihadis. Then a tip-off alerts Michelle to another incident in Tamerlan's past.
One of my sources reaches out to me. He says, remember that story that you did on that murder scene that looked like an Al-Qaeda training video? Yeah. He said, well, one of the victims in that case was very close friends with Tamerlan Tsarnaev. And all of a sudden it hit me.
Michelle had come across Tamerlan before. In 2011, in Waltham, a city bordering Watertown, she covered the murder of 3 drug dealers. Tamerlan and the victims all had a connection through a local boxing gym. One in particular, Brendan Mess, was a close friend.
Now, Tamerlan Tsarnaev was a celebrity in the boxing world, and Tamerlan was teaching him how to box. So together, they had something very much in common, daily visits to the Y Crew gym.
On September the 11th, 2011, Mess and his 2 friends are slaughtered.
It looked like nothing other than a ritualistic murder on the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, where the victims were nearly beheaded. 2 of the Jewish victims were sexually mutilated. The bodies are sprinkled with drugs.
The killers didn't steal their money. You know, it wasn't a drug robbery, it was a statement, and it was a political statement.
Despite the gruesome nature of the crime, investigators deemed the killings to be drug-related, and no one was ever prosecuted. But Tamerlan's response to news of his friend's death aroused suspicions among the victims' relatives.
He skipped the funeral, and a lot of people thought that was strange and told the police that. They had information that he was involved with these folks, and there was people that made that clear that he should be interviewed, and he never was.
Many believe that this gruesome execution was the result of Tamerlan's radicalization.
People believe that Tamerlan Tsarnaev killed those 3 guys because he told his friends, stop dealing weed to my little brother. They didn't stop dealing weed to his little brother, so they were executed.
But how could Tamerlan have killed 3 people on his own?
Then you find out that there's another guy that was involved in the Y Crew gym. Ibrahim Todashev was friends with Tamerlan Tsarnaev, was friends with the victim, and was another mixed martial arts fighter. He lived in Boston up until September 11th, 2011.
But on the night of the murder, Todashev skips town.
That night, he hands his rent payment to his roommate and fled town for Florida.
Like Tamerlan, Todashev was never questioned about the murders. That is, until now. 1 month after the marathon bombing, the FBI tracks down Ibrahim Todashev, the only man alive who can explain why he and Tamerlan escaped questioning for the triple murder. But right off the bat, the encounter seems odd to Michelle.
That was one of the strangest things. They knew this was a dangerous dude, but they decide to interview him about this unsolved grisly triple murder, and they do it at his house. So right away, that kind of raises an eyebrow, like, what do you mean? You wouldn't drag this kind of a dangerous man down to the station at the very least?
The story that the authorities have given is that Todashev was sitting at a table and he was writing his confession and he was implicating Tamerlan Tsarnaev in those murders with him.
My name is Ibrahim Todashev. I want to tell you the story about the robbery me and Tam did in Waltham in September 2011. We went to their house and Tam had a gun. We went into the house with the 3 guys in there. We put them on the ground and then we taped their hands up.
That is as far as Todashev gets.
That confession would never be signed, and it's now splattered with blood. Ibrahim Todashev's blood. In the process of this confession, Todashev is shot and killed by a Boston FBI agent. It's complete craziness.
The FBI claims that Todashev became increasingly agitated and suddenly attacked their agent. Todashev's family dispute the Bureau's account.
There's been questions about the trajectory of the bullets and how he was actually shot that don't exactly line up with the official explanation of what happened. They've never released the results of that autopsy, so that only exacerbates those questions.
Michelle suspects that Todashev knew something about Tamerlan that the FBI didn't want to get out.
This is really starting to smell like a cover, frankly. Dead men tell no tales. And the list of people who had any knowledge about Tamerlan's relationship with the FBI was growing shorter by the second.
So far, Michelle's case is only circumstantial, but she has further evidence that Tamerlan is being protected.
Now we know the Russians told the FBI and the CIA that Tamerlan was going to travel to Russia and join the jihad. Well, guess what? In January of 2012, Tamerlan, while on 2 terror watch lists, goes to Russia.
Despite the explicit warning from the Russians, Tamerlan was able to fly to Moscow, travel south to Dagestan, and make contact with his second cousin, Mahomed Kartashov. Now under arrest, Kartashov is able to fill in the gaps.
Magomed Kardashev was kind of a well-known guy in the Northern Caucasus for being a jihadi sympathizer. He tells them, look, my cousin came here. He was talking about the jihad. He wanted to join the jihad. And that Tamerlan talked a lot about acts of war. In fact, he quoted a line from the Quran, I want to cut off their heads and make them kneel in front of you. And immediately, my thoughts flew to what happened on September 11th, 2011.
Kartashov claims he tried to steer his cousin away from violence, but Tamerlan was keen to get to a specific jihadist hotspot.
And one of the things that Magomed tells them is that Tamerlan was very willing to go into the forest, which is parlance for terrorist training camp. So Tamerlan and I tell the second cousin that he's going to Unanswered, which just happened to be the place that was training young jihadi.
Soon after Tamerlan leaves his cousin, the training camp in Unanswered is attacked by Russian forces. 7 notorious terrorists are killed in a fierce firefight.
Everybody in the compound is dead. One of those targets was Tamerlan's buddy, William Plotnikov. 2 others were cousins that were wanted all over Russia for some horrible acts of savagery. So it was a house full of probably some of the worst terrorists in the world.
But Tamerlan is safely on a plane, and just 3 days after the raid, he re-enters the United States.
So it is way too coincidental that Tamerlan Zanaev just happens to flee the country with no dough, pays cash for a one-way ticket from a terrorist hotbed back to the United States of America, where he is not a citizen, doesn't have a passport, and is armed only with his green card on 2 terror watch lists. Something stinks.
Online, Michelle discovers that both the terrorists and the Russian authorities admit that it was an informant that led security forces to the camp. No one can confirm his identity, but Michelle has a strong suspicion.
Well, I've been covering crime for a very long time. The guy who gets out of the house right before the raid, the guy who gets out alive, is usually the informant.
April 2013, just weeks after the Boston bombing, Homeland Security officials are being grilled in the US Senate. How did Tamerlan manage to leave the United States and re-enter 6 months later without triggering an alert?
Was your department aware of his travels to Russia? And if you weren't, the reason?
Yes, the system pinged when he was leaving the United States. By the time he returned, all investigations the matter had been closed.
The system picked up his departure, but did not pick up him coming back. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, and I can give you the detail in a classified setting, but I think the salient fact there, Senator, is that the FBI text alert on him at that point was more than a year old and had expired.
But the FBI has already given a different explanation for the apparent intelligence failure.
The point I'm trying to make is after having talked to the FBI, they told me they had no knowledge of him leaving or coming back. The name was misspelled, so I would like to talk to you more about this case.
Michelle is convinced that the FBI is hiding the truth.
There was a misspelling of his name. Number one, we spent a crap load of money as taxpayers to buy a system to ensure that if people are on the terrorist watch list, they have multiple spellings of their names attached to it. So that's my first reaction is, come on, misspelling? But then I got a copy of his travel records, and there was nothing misspelled on those records at all. It was a blatant lie.
May 15th, 2015. 2 years after the Boston bombing, Dzhokhar Tsarnaev is sentenced to death for his part in the attack. His defense was that he had been manipulated by his older brother. But Dzhokhar's attitude was counterproductive.
He was a brutal little punk. He acted like a brutal little punk in court every single solitary day.
I believe Dzhokhar was scared to disappoint his brother, and he wanted to live up to what his brother wanted him to do. That said, he's an adult, and he made these decisions on his own to take these steps to be a part of this joint endeavor. He could have walked away at any time. And the most pivotal piece of evidence in that trial that ended up sinking Dzhokhar was that video when he put the backpack behind the Richard family, and he stood there for 4 minutes. 4 minutes to stand there and think about what you're about to do to a little kid. That shows intent, and that had a tremendous impact on the jury. I think that's what ultimately swayed them to give him the death penalty.
A year after Dzhokhar's death sentence, the government released the file containing his brother's immigration documents. It is heavily redacted, but to Michelle, it is dynamite.
The A file was everything. Any immigration attorney in the country will tell you right away. 2009, Tamerlan Tsarnaev is arrested, making him ineligible for naturalization, period. But mysteriously, upon his return from Russia, he is promised citizenship. He got this letter saying, come take the oath, October 2012.
But Michelle has more evidence that Tamerlan was being helped to secure his citizenship. Another document shows an unknown agency was sponsoring him, and that process of sponsorship had started before he went to Russia.
What seems innocuous on the surface is really very telling. It's a very expensive process to become an American citizen, but Tamerlan didn't have to pay a dime. Every one of his fees were waived. Why? Well, there was a sponsoring agency. Now, what's interesting is that sponsoring agency on this paperwork is redacted.
Michelle can't tell who was sponsoring Tamerlan's application, but the date when it was first submitted is horribly familiar.
The most telling and glaring smoking gun in that file were the dates. So Tamerlan Tsarnaev is promised citizenship right after he gets back from Russia. And that redacted agency began helping him, began sponsoring him for citizenship right after the September 11th, 2011 Waltham triple murders. It was just so clear, it sent a chill down my spine.
If the FBI was the agency sponsoring Tamerlan's citizenship, Michelle doubts it was doing it on its own.
The CIA operates assets overseas. The FBI doesn't have jurisdiction. So I think it's unfair to point the finger solely at the FBI, because I think that Tamerlan Tsarnaev really was being used by a plethora of federal agencies.
January 2013. Tamerlan is attending an interview with an immigration official. This time, he fully expects to walk away with his citizenship.
Tamerlan Tsarnaev went to the immigration office for what he thought would be his last interview.
But Tamerlan will be frustrated. For months, his citizenship has been caught up in an argument between immigration officials and the FBI.
Obviously, an immigration official took a look at Tamerlan's and Ives record and went, whoa, 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 whoa. This guy's on 2 terror watch lists. He's been arrested. He doesn't have a job. He is the exact opposite of the people who are naturalized in this country. Immigration would be like, what are you talking about? Why would this guy, an unemployed Muslim with a rap sheet, be a candidate for citizenship? And the FBI is like, well, we looked into the guy, no problem. No, give it to him. No, give it to him. No, give it to him.
In the end, it's a battle immigration services won.
He was told that he wasn't going to walk out a citizen that day. He was livid. And that's when I think he really became motivated to bomb the Boston Marathon. In his mind, he had been made a promise. He fulfilled his end of the bargain, and the government didn't fulfill theirs. He needed to get revenge. And he did it in the most despicable, cowardly, grotesque way they could ever imagine.
4 months later, on April the 15th, Patriots Day, Tamerlan and his brother Jokar unleash a 5-day reign of terror on the city of Boston. 4 people are killed, 264 wounded, of which 16 suffer life-changing injuries. According to Michelle McPhee, it's the horrifying end of a journey which began with Tamerlan's dream to box for America. Frustrated, he becomes increasingly radicalized, but finds hope by becoming an informer for the FBI. Mysteriously, the murder of 3 drug dealers goes unpunished, as his application for citizenship is fast-tracked. Was Tamerlan's trip to Russia a covert operation? Did he lead the Russian forces to a terrorist camp? And if the marathon attack was a grotesque act of revenge, did FBI secrecy cost the life of a young police officer?
I think there's a lot of people in the law enforcement community that think Sean Collier should be alive today. I think we need to know what the feds knew about Tamerlan Tsarnaev and when they knew it. And if they had information about him, why wasn't that shared appropriately with the local authorities?
To this day, the FBI disputes Michelle McPhee's claims, but the journalist believes she has uncovered the truth behind the Boston bombings.
The real story is one of a federal informant who was working for us, who was made a promise. And when that promise was broken, he got mad and he got even and people died. And no one is answering the questions about what allowed that to take place.